this was the planned topic. It just happens to coincide with what happens to be a lot of tragedy here in America. This is the last part of a series on, different life cycle events. What we're going to see is that when it comes to death and mourning and the other extremely therapeutic customs that have been built around deaths and funerals and dealing with death, it's incredible. The power that we Jewish people have when it comes to having to deal with such incredible tragedy, But we're not really into death. I mean, even the next world, Olam Haba, where the soul goes to when it leaves this world, is not even mentioned in the Torah in the 5 books of Moses. We aren't into it. You may have noticed that most of the time, even cemeteries are not put. Let's see, churches will always have like cemeteries around them, like in all the horror movies, And you walk into a church and there's like, there's death on the wall. You're like looking at a dead figure, And Judaism, for the most part, we usually put our cemeteries on the edge of town. We're not shunning it. It's a part of life, and it should be thought about and dealt with, but it's not really our focus. We don't walk around talking about death. You don't really hear me or any rabbi, I like to think, talking heaven and hell, like he's like preachers, We don't really do that thing. We talk about life, and it's based upon a concept that Judaism loves life. Right? You can break all the laws in the Torah in order to save a life. My wife, I may have mentioned in one of the classes, actually, I went into labor on Shabbat. I didn't say, could we wait 3 hours, please? I'm like, Sabbath, You get into a taxi, you get into a car, and you go, Life trumps all. And we're, as I always say, dying for God is very, very easy. Many religions are very into that, You blow yourself up and that's the end of it. And Judaism says dying for God is easy, but living for God is much harder. And we want to live for God. Having said that, death is part of life and has to be dealt with. And unfortunately here in America, this, I don't want to call it a tragedy, because like a tragedy is like a flood, a volcano, or an earthquake. It's an atrocity. And I'm not going to be here, looking for reasons of why it happened and gun control. I'm not really interested in that, to be honest with you. There's opinions both ways. I want to look at the Jewish view from Jewish sources on the laws, customs, ideas of how we deal with tragedy in general. What is the mind frame? And sadly, I don't know how it happened as well. One of my close rabbi friends lost his daughter this week as well. It's, and I wasn't able to be at the funeral. I'll be visiting. So, it's a sad, very sad thing, losing a child. And we've seen here, these people lost their children. I personally, I can't handle it. I can't even read the stories. My wife is like talking about. I'm like, I can't even hear it. That's when you have kids as well. I'm being very, very sensitive to it. When you talk to kids about it, unfortunately, they're so desensitized to this kind of stuff. They see so much death on television and the rest of it, and games. But we should be sensitized, and it should hurt us. But how do we deal with it? Well, first of all, the idea of death. So death is mentioned. It's, as we said, a part of life, and it's not the end. We're made of body and soul, and although let me be very clear when I say this, we don't tell this to people who are going through suffering unless they ask. But body and soul eventually separate. The soul lives on. The body is a temporary vehicle by which the soul can achieve things in this world. So death is not the end. The soul does move to a better place, right? To Shemayim, to heaven. And the soul lives on eternally and gets much closer to God. Ironically, when we mourn, we're not mourning so much for the person, we're mourning for us who are left behind. A vacuum, a void has been left. We're upset for ourselves, because we don't have these friends, loved ones, children, We're really mourning for ourselves. Happens to be in Judaism, the soul of these people who move on, they've gone to a better place. So we're not actually mourning for them per se, but we're upset for ourselves. Having said that, sometimes in life, the Jewish sources say, it's worth remembering that life is a temporary reality. There is a fixed lifespan, and everything that lives must die. That is the nature of the world. And the Talmud actually says if you want to really control your evil impulses, there's a number of things that you should watch out for. You want to do the wrong thing. There's a checklist of things the Talmud tells you to do, and one of them is to remember that death is there. You know, it's something we all have coming to us. We don't focus on it, and we have this incredible ability. The Midrash tells us that it's actually hidden. It's an amazing thing that we're all going towards it, but we don't think about it too much. But we should think about it once in a while. One of the reasons, interestingly enough, that we wear white on Yom Kippur, I've seen that many people wear white on Yom Kippur, the kittel Yom Kippur, is that because the shrouds that the dead body are wrapped in are white. So one idea of Yom Kippur, which helps us do repentance, is to remember that of all the fleeting pleasures and mistakes I've made, death is coming. And all the arguments I've had with all my friends, is it really worth it? Because death is coming. So Yom Kippur actually, it's not a sad day, by the way. I don't think it's a sad day, but it's a day of contemplation, you know. And part of that is to remember the death is part of everything. So we don't tell it to people who are mourning. We don't go up to people who've just lost a loved one and say, "Don't worry, their soul's gone to a good place." It's offensive. It may be true, but we don't say that. And we'll see actually the laws of shiva and the laws of death and mourning are reflective of our thought process on it. Now, many people, when they go to a shiva house, you know, shiva house, the word shiva means 7. There's actually a book I read, so it's a funny story. So I got to throw a funny story into a class on death. How can't you, you know? So it's a true story of a rabbi. He wrote, Rabbi Feldman. He wrote in a book. He was a rabbi in a community in Atlanta, and he said that a woman called him up from the community and said, an elderly woman, and said, "Rabbi, I have a problem. My husband just died, and I don't have a freezer." It's like, what? It's like, my husband died, I don't have a freezer. It's like, where's your husband? It's like, he's terrified. What's you done with him? It's like, well, we buried him. You know, the Reform rabbi buried him. He goes, what do you want a freezer for? He goes, well, I read in a book that for 7 days after someone dies, you sit and shiver. Shiver? Okay. This is a true story. It's amazing, right? So shiva actually means 7, and we'll see that's one of 5 parts of the therapeutic process of getting over death of loved ones, specifically 7 close ones. So let's start at the beginning, and that is we don't say it to people, but we're talking this on a rational level, not just emotional, and that is we made up of body and soul, and the body is finite, it gets buried, and the soul lives on. Okay, so we talk about death, God bless you, we're talking of death of the body, not of the soul. The soul is eternal, is a part of God, and you know, we come into this, there's a famous story, you know, of the Chofetz Chaim. I've always wanted to tell the story in this course. I didn't get a chance. Now it's time. And it was visited by some American businessmen. And he lived in a very small home in a place called Radin. Very, very humble, you know. Like one little couch and like one bed, whatever, like a wooden chair, you know. And these American people walked into this leader of the generation's house, and they said, "My goodness, where's your furniture?" You know, they were like shocked. And he was like, "Where's your furniture?" And they said, "Well, we're from America, we're just passing through." And he said, "So am I." You know, our turn in this world is a temporary a station to achieve, to do goodness, and that elevates the soul. But ultimately, the body does return to earth. Death goes back historically to Gan Eden. It wasn't the original plan. It's actually Plan B, according to the deeper Jewish sources. Plan A was that humans would live forever. Adam and Eve originally meant to live forever. However, they sinned. Why they sinned, what they did is not for now, but it was done purposefully in order to allow people to achieve, and part of that was death entered into the world. So death actually wasn't Plan A, it was Plan B. Well, we don't like it, you know what I'm saying? Plan A was that people would live forever. That was not to be, okay? So that's how far death goes back into. After a person dies, what happens? So let's get into it a little bit, and then we'll talk about how we cope with that, how we view death in general. Okay. So there's 2 things. One is the departed soul, and what happens to it, which Jewish sources do speak about vaguely, and those who are left behind, and how we cope and how we deal with that void. So as we said already, the soul goes to a better place. However, the deeper sources, if you're interested, there's actually Rabbi Ari Kaplan, who was a very great rabbi, lived in the last generation. Not even, he died in the 80s, I think. He writes on this in his book, Handbook of Jewish Thought, and he happens to be a great Kabbalist as well. And he says that we are taught that immediately after death, the soul is in great confusion. A lot of what we do when a person dies is because the soul is in great confusion. It's been attached to a body, limited to a body. Once it leaves the body, whatever confusion means for the soul, it means. Therefore, there is a custom not to leave a dead body alone. Okay? We try to be with that dead body because the soul of that person, although is no longer in that body, it hovers around the body and is still present. Therefore, what we say, how we act in front of the dead body is important because the soul, quote unquote, sees it. And that is true for the shiva house as well, because an element of the soul also resides in the shiva house as well, they say. Okay? So that's one very important factor. How we act, like this idea of the wake, where the casket is open and people are around like schmoozing and drinking and the rest of it. This is not the Jewish way to be. Right? The way we act around the dead body. But one second, we said the essence of a person is a soul. What do we care about the body? Well, it's pretty much like this. The body, by the mere fact it was so close to the soul for so long, it has an inherent holiness. Just like a Torah cover. It's a piece of velvet. It's in the store. It's a meaningless piece of fabric. But once I attach it around the Torah and it comes into contact with it, this is actually Jewish law, it takes on a level of holiness, and can't just be thrown away. It has to be treated with a certain amount of decorum. So too, the body, since it's in direct contact with the soul and actually contains the soul within it, it has inherent holiness. So when the body dies, first of all, the soul itself is there to some degree, but the body itself has to be treated with the utmost respect. Okay, we don't just dispose of it, and we certainly do not cremate. This is completely forbidden according to Jewish law. The body does not belong to you, which is also why suicide is seen as one of the worst sins a person can do. We have no right to take our lives. If a person is put in certain situations, they should give up their life, but that is not a voluntary decision. No one wants to do that. We like life. But the body itself, cremation is an abhorrence. We do not tolerate it, and the sources speak very much against it. Interesting enough, in a situation where a Jewish person demands they be cremated, and then their children or loved ones afterwards can actually go against their wishes, knowing full well that where they are right now with their perspective of the spiritual world, they wouldn't want it. So usually a dying person's last words, but when it comes to this, we're like, no, we don't do it. Because that was based upon a false rationale whilst they were in this world. Now they're not in this world, and we are actually really keen on keeping last people's words and wishes, but in terms of this, we don't do it. And the children and people can actually go against it. Okay? So once the soul leaves the body, it is in confusion, and therefore we stay near the body, and we treat the body with respect by the mere fact that the body itself has holiness, and the disembodied soul is intensely aware of its physical surroundings, especially before it is buried. Okay? Now, what's important over here is that the burial has to happen as soon as possible after the death. Okay? Since the soul is in confusion, for some reason, the burial itself calms the soul down. Now, you would think differently, but that, according to Jewish law, ideally on the day itself, you would like to bury the deceased. The Torah itself talks about it. The Torah gives an extraordinary comparison that actually it is. I'll give you, this is from Deuteronomy, actually, from Devarim. And it says that if a person is sentenced to death and executed, we have death penalty in Judaism, right? No one ever has a right to keep their life. There is a death penalty in Judaism, but that's not for now. They have to be really bad in order to get it. You have to bury it the same day. That's what the Torah says. And Rashi says, why is that such a big thing? And says it's an affront to God, because if people see the body hung, right, or see the body in a state, they may mistake it for God, which is an extraordinary comment, but can be taken metaphorically as well, that it's a Chil Hashem. We see this body that had the soul inside it, right, being just left out. It's affront to those that see it. It's a Chil Hashem, desecration of God's name, and therefore we want to bury the body as quickly as possible. Okay, and that brings great relief to the soul that once actually occupied that body itself. Okay, so that's the first thing we do. Now, there's an interesting thing, and it's law. But once again, the laws and customs reflect so much. There's a status that most people don't realize called onen. Onen. And what onen is from the moment a person dies to the moment they are buried, the people who are in charge, involved in burying that body, usually the children or the close relatives, very close relatives, are not allowed to do mitzvot. They're not allowed to pray. They're not allowed to put on tefillin. They're not allowed to make blessings. Nothing. They are what we call in Hebrew patur min mitzvot. Now you can't do the negative mitzvot, you can't start shooting people, right? But you cannot do any of the positive mitzvot. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is because they need to be busy in getting this body quickly into the ground, organizing the funeral, making the funeral happen, because we said it's a great distress for the soul being out. I want to give you another answer, which is very pertinent to what's happening, and it goes like this. The person's not obligated to do mitzvot, because when they are in such a sad state over, when in such a sad state over the death of a loved one, we don't expect them to praise God. God doesn't expect it. They're upset. They're broken. They're not expected to walk around saying, oh, don't worry, the soul lives on, right? They're upset, and they should be allowed to grieve. And the grieving process follows a certain flow. There's a pattern that goes from a week to a month to 11 months to a year. It follows this kind of like trajectory, but immediately they're not expected to do any mitzvot, no kaddish, no nothing. The body goes in the ground, then you can rebuild your relationship with God. But when that point of death initially happens, there is silence. There's crying and emotion, but there is no praise and there is no religiosity at all that is expected from the person. And this idea of silence is a theme. So when the body is buried, Kaddish is said, and Kaddish we think is like the mourner's prayer. It's not. It really praises God and has benefit for the soul of the deceased. But we'll leave that aside for a second. The next part is the shiva house, and usually communities come together at this time, and that is a very Jewish thing. And we're seeing it now with the aftermath of this Sandy Hook atrocity, where people are just flocking in amazingly around these people. Happens to be in the Jewish world, it's part of the system. Part of the system is that the community is there to make food and to be there for the family. But let me tell you an incredible custom which reflects everything we're saying. There is a law that when a person is in shiva, which means they basically are in a state of intense mourning. Let's say a person loses a parent. They live in their house. They should not leave. They should not go to work. They should just sit on a low chair, or on the floor actually, anything low, as in low. Shoes are taken off. All these laws are there to bring upsetness out of them. They're not comfortable. They let their hair, their beards grow. We push a discomfort onto them. They should be upset, and it needs to come out. They cover mirrors. We're not into the physical. Right? There's Kabbalistic reasons too, but basic idea, we're not into the physical. Now check out this law. That's them. When you go and visit someone who's been through this tragedy, and I'm going to have to do it myself in a couple of days, and I'm not looking forward to it, but it's one of those uncomfortable things we all have to do. Let me tell you the Jewish law. When you walk in, you don't say anything. When you sit down, you don't say anything. According to Jewish law, you don't speak until you're spoken to. That's the law. Why would that be? Don't these people need reassuring? Don't they need to be spoken to? And the answer is no. Not if they don't want to be. They've just buried a parent, heaven forbid, a child, Lalaine, we should know such things. They're in a tense morning. It's not your job. Oh, don't worry, it'll be okay. Don't worry. Keep your mouth shut. They're entitled to be upset. If they speak to you, you speak back. But if you walk into a shiva house, there's a general feeling of discomfort, and there should be an element of silence. Now look, reality is sometimes I went to a shiva house of a very elderly lady. She passed away. So, you know what I'm saying, once you're in your 90s, it does become like a celebration of life. Okay, I guess the same law applies. Who knows how upset they are? But it's not your job to cheer them up. That's not what you are meant to do as a friend or family member. You are meant to be there, and your presence should be there. If they need you to talk to you, then they talk to you. But you keep your mouth shut otherwise. So all these people descend upon these, and I see stories of it. Oh, it's going to be okay. Who are you to say anything? Maybe this person just lost a child. Who are you? I don't want someone telling me if it's going to be okay. The soul lives on. I find that very offensive. Death has just happened. I want to grieve. And for that, everyone has to shut up so I can let it out. So these laws were created to create that atmosphere. Support, we're there for you. Does anyone know a clue to this idea of silence? What we see, one of the objects that are used at a shiva house? So shiva house, many people eat an egg or beans or historically lentils. We know that Jacob was making lentils, right, for his father, Isaac, who was mourning for his father, Abraham. Okay, and that's the dish that he actually sold to Esau. So he was making lentils, and he was mourning. Why lentils, or why eggs? Why does the custom have egg? You heard it's eggs or lentils? Because it's round, so it gives you the idea of life is circular. There are ups and downs. Right? It was going to come to an end. Things go around. But also it has no mouth. The egg has no mouth on it, which is there to remind you that a mourner has no mouth. Keep it shut. That's actually the reason we have these foods. The foods are there to speak to us. Or in this case, to tell us that words don't suffice. There's nothing you can say to these people that is going to make you feel better. To such a degree, you're not even expected to. You're meant to be present. And by the way, there is no greater mitzvah. Going to a shiva house, helping with the burial, they say actually one of the greatest mitzvah is actually to bury the dead, right? Because it's a one-way giving. Except the greatest mitzvah, right? If you do a favor for a friend, she owes you, you know what I'm saying? But when you bury the dead, that's a one-way giving. Ain't no one doing back for you, you know? It's seen a great mitzvah. But taking care of people, go through that, burying the dead, taking the expense of it, the brunt of it, being there for them, helping them, it's a great mitzvah. But you're not there to rationalize. You're not there to philosophize. You're there to just be present at that moment. Okay? And the soul is there and realizes it. And, I mean, I don't know how you see with our eyes, but the soul, as it were, sees what is going on. One of the, yeah.
If you're at a shiva call and the person wants food, you bring them food?
Yeah.
Do you only bring them food if they ask you for it?
No. Generally speaking, you just bring food. They're not going to ask. You just bring food. Everyone turns up with food because these people can't leave home. They're meant to actually stay put for a week. So everyone just like bombards them with food. That's fine.
But not just bringing food to the house, like at the shiva call, walking up to them with a plate of food.
Oh, they're meant to be served. They should be served. Yes, it's both. People bring food to the shiva house, and they should be served. They should sit down and be served.
And even if they don't say they're hungry and ask for food, to bring them.
I guess, yeah. Yeah, and they'll eat in the house. Yeah. There's an unusual mitzvah when it comes to dealing with death. And that is the eulogy. in Hebrew called the hesped. And the unusual law is that the person who eulogizes the deceased, and we can only imagine, I mean, I have had the misfortune of performing maybe, thank God, with the population I work with, I don't have that many people. People have like these pulpits with older people, you know, have a lot more. I deal with a younger population, haven't had too much. Sometimes they ask me to do a funeral of a parent if they don't have a rabbi, you know. So I've been in the situation. But there is a law. And the law is that you have to give a hesped, a eulogy. And the eulogy is meant to make people cry. People are meant to be upset. It's not a philosophical discussion of death. You're there, and people should realize that this person is gone. This child is gone, and we should feel upset. And that's the mitzvah of the eulogizer, whether it be the rabbi or the friend. They should tell it, and people should sit there, and they should cry. You know? They should cry. They should feel the pain that the person is going through, and they sit, and they hear it, and it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. The Talmud says, Rav said to Rav Shmuel, son of Shilat, one of the great rabbis of the time, make the crowd emotional during your eulogy for me, for there I will be standing. I'm going to be there, and people being upset. Now, there have been people, great scholars, that say, don't eulogize me too much, don't talk too much about me. I hear, and if they want to keep it to a minimum, but people should be upset. Why are we upset? Once again, not for the soul of that child or that person. They have gone to a better place. We know that. We don't say it, but we know it. It's for us. We need to know what we're missing. A void has been created, and we need to be made aware of that. We need to be aware of that. And it goes right back in Jewish history. Moses was mourned. His brother Aaron was mourned even more. People loved him even more. Miriam died. See? And all these people, they were eulogized, and people came together. It goes back thousands of years in Jewish history. Yeah.
So what happens when you're giving eulogy or you're mourning somebody who did something evil, like the shooter or like people who killed?
That's a very, very good question.
Are you still mourning them? Are you still mourning their soul?
I would say that in a case like this, if someone who is so purely evil passes away, I have been informed of certain times when people do not do anything for them at all. There are cases in the Talmud of very evil people who people just, I wouldn't say discarded, but were kind of like left unburied. Right? It's not that nowadays. We bury everyone. We take our greatest enemies, we give them these great burials nowadays, you know? Right. There are such cases of people who are so bad that the communities just didn't want to get involved with them. So, no is the answer. It may be that the family members are not obligated in many of these things that we do. Most people... Oh, who said we don't believe in hell? You're obviously not married yet. That's a joke. I'm sorry to take that back. I got told that's how I cope. I told jokes, that's how I cope. Okay, so I'm going to talk about hell right now. We don't have the idea of hell. Hell, this idea of, you know, fire and brimstone is not a Jewish idea. We do have something called Gehenna. Gehenna is a cleansing station, and I was planning to talk about it, is a cleansing phase that the soul goes through. The idea of fire and brimstone, interestingly, does come from Jewish thought. It's not a physical thing at all. One of the things that are felt by the soul after it leaves its body is great shame of not having achieved what it could have achieved or should have achieved, and maybe what it did. So God, in His mercy, the Ramchal Ramosh Chaim Luzzatto, one of the great Kabbalists lived in Italy a few hundred years ago, says actually it's a mercy of God that He actually allows us to have our sins removed from our souls, even in the next world, even this place called Gehenna in hell. It's a short amount of time that lasts for, anyone know? 12 months. 12 months. Notice that's how long we say Kaddish for. Okay? And that is a cleansing period. According to the commentators, I mean, the stories of the Talmud of people are extremely bad, but everyone is fixable to some degree, right? Ideally, you want to fix yourself in this world and not go through that. But it's not eternal damnation like the Christians believe. There's no such thing. There is a short cleansing period. And by the way, that's the idea of the heat is because when a person's ashamed, they get red. So that's a physical metaphor, but it's not a physical place whatsoever. It's what the soul goes through. We don't talk about it too much, but it's written about. And the soul goes through this experience, and after that, it can transcend to a higher place of Gan Eden, okay, of the holding place of the souls, okay. So there is a short amount of time. If a person is wicked, it's for 12 months. If they're a good person, 11 months. And actually, what we do is we actually say Kaddish for 11 months. Then we wait a month. Most people do this, and say Kaddish at the 12th on the yard site on the yearly. And the idea of the year, we're jumping a little bit, but I'm going to go back in a second, is the year, there's a certain amount, the soul is judged again yearly. Question, what's it based upon? Because it's not doing anything. In the next world, there's no good or bad deeds. It's actually the deeds of the children. Deeds of the children. The next generation, that's the only thing that can affect, which is why even today, even children will say Kaddish, right? The children of the people will say, oh, even those irreligious, secular Jew, I've got to say Kaddish. Right? There's something to that. It's not a small thing, you know. They should do more. Right, learning and doing mitzvot on their behalf, giving charity, that, according to the commentators, actually elevates the soul of the deceased. Specifically, Brahma Zaka Abba, the child has the power to lift up. So we start with this intense Onan period where we don't even pray. There's a famous story I heard from one of my rabbis, that he was on a plane once, and he saw some guy, like a rabbi-looking character, and you know rabbis, they'll pray, say shacharit, they'll, make blessings, whatever. And he saw this guy eating, not praying, not doing anything. And he thought, this guy's a fake. He's got the whole garb on, and he's not doing anything. And actually, he was going to Israel, transporting his father and mother, with him. So he was actually patur from all the mitzvah. So that's why he wasn't saying anything. So that first moment, we're absolutely intense. We can't even pray. By the way, Shabbat does not count. We do not mourn a Shabbat. There is no mourning Shabbat. It switches off for 25 hours, and then it turns on again. Literally like that. Literally like that. There is no public, you get off of the floor, you put on your shoes, you go to your table, you eat, drink wine. No public mourning Shabbat. Shabbat is God day. That's more about what Shabbat is than what, but we do nothing at all. But right afterwards, you're back in. So for Onan, you go to Shiva, which is the 7 intense days of mourning. You don't leave your house. People visit you. And that is a time just let it out. You just need 7 days, one cycle of just letting it out. Just throwing out all that emotion. Then you have the Shloshim, the 30 days. And then already people start to engage in life again. But certain laws of mourning, a person for a loved one, a parent, for example, does not listen to music. Actually, that's the entire idea. They should not listen to music. Anything that makes them happy. They need to be in a state of upsetness, right, for the entire year. If a person, by the way, I just want to show you something interesting. We do this because that's what we're told to do, right? Let's say a person has a wedding, which happens a lot, planned, and a parent dies. What should they do? Let's say a person has a wedding planned, right? A person, well, I won't say anyone here, heaven forbid, but let's say we have here, Shoshana and Moshe getting married in March, and his father, passes away in, Feb. You postpone the wedding for a year, right? No. You get married.
You keep the wedding date?
You keep the wedding date. You go ahead. But I'm upset. So I'm upset. And I need to get married. And they're mutually exclusive. I know people who've sat Shiva on one side of a building, and then you go through a door, and their son's getting married on the other side. And people walk in, they visit to be Menachem Avel, to visit, Avelut, and then they walk through and go to this wedding. And he can't go to the wedding because he can't listen to music. Right? So, it's the father over here, right? So he goes to the wedding, and then people walk through and they celebrate. Like, what can it be? Like, intensely mourning over here. Life has to go on. Especially weddings. Especially weddings. And for the groom, in the case where his parent, so for that 1 week, the laws of mourning leave him completely. He's out of it. You know? So at the same time, it's unusual. We're dealing with the death thing, but to some degree, I've got to move on. I've got to move on. You know? And the whole year is actually there to help you. And one of the greatest gifts, the Talmud says, God gave us is the ability to forget. Why should it be? A person loses a loved one, they should be living that forever. How can anyone get over the death of a parent? And you know what? Hashem gave us this ability. Even the worst things that have happened to us, we're able to forget. And we're able to move on. And we're able to go on in life. I mean, what these parents are going through, I can't even think about. I don't want to even think about it. It's intense. But they will move on. And God willing, they'll be able to build up their lives and move on with this terrible atrocity that was perpetrated against their kids. And hopefully at some point, we don't tell them, they have to want to do it, they will create something in this world as a living memory. And many people do that. And it's a therapeutic thing to do, and it's a zchut, it's a merit for the child. You know? Many people set up charitable foundations. You know, there's a family in Israel's child was killed by Arab terrorists, young boys actually. And they set up this Kobe Foundation for their child, and it does incredible good, you know. If you ask them, though, they'd say to you, I'd rather not have the Child Foundation, have my child back. we don't pretend, you know, but this is the situation we're found in, and they'd rather have my kid back. I've heard, they said this to me. And we say, oh, it's amazing. Years later, you set up a foundation. I say, it is very good. I'd rather have my child back. But it does bring great relief to the soul, and it brings relief to them, and at least some good can come out of the despicable evil that is perpetrated on these individuals. So we go from Onen, we go to Shiva, we go to Shloshim, then we go to Year. Okay? And a memorial is set up, a stone. And by the way, this unveiling thing, when they go and they unveil it, I mean, when I do some unveiling sometimes, I did one like a few months ago, and they go and have like a curtain, they put, this is like nonsense, right? They give me the curtain, I was like, put it in the garbage. What are you doing? It's like they're unveiling it, right? There should be some memory, and people need to go somewhere to, you know, it's interesting. How do we view cemeteries in general? Right? They're not nice places, but they're real. So cemeteries in Judaism, I read something fascinating, are like bridges. We were in this Warsaw cemetery, you know, we got hundreds of years of history. But even if you don't, a cemetery bridges the past, the present, and the future. That's really what I read. It's got this bridging effect, which connects people to something else. I read this nice piece over here. Society is not reborn every generation, creating its identity and political and social system from scratch. We intimately connect to the past and the future. Those not yet born have an interest in how we lead our lives and what we do, for our decisions affect them. And those already gone have a stake in the present. They built the world we inherited and handed over to our trust. So it's a beautiful idea, right? And that's how we see it, you know. It's this bridging world, one from the other. Can I share with you a very unusual law, which I never knew the reason for, and just read something about it? There is a law when you visit a cemetery, we pray, we go to the headstone. There's an element of the person's soul still residing on the remains of the body, by the way. Right? There's a big dispute all the time of, like, burial grounds become holy places. You know, you don't just, these bodies. There's an interesting custom. It's actually 3 times you have to wash your hands with a vessel, with a kli, with a cup. When you wake up in the morning, before you eat bread, and when you leave a cemetery. When you leave a cemetery. And the one in the morning, we know there's certain impurity on the hands. When you wake up, you should wash your hands in the morning with a cup. Before you eat bread, it goes back to remembrance of the temple, the service of the priests. So we do that as a memory to that. We wash our hands and other reasons too. But I never knew the reason for this thing in the cemetery. Why do we wash our hands in the cemetery? Have you seen people wash their hands in the cemetery? You seen this? Yeah, we did it, right? I never knew the reason for it. I read something recently I must share with you. It's related to actually a Torah law. The Torah tells that if a person is found dead, and we don't know, and they are on the outskirts of town, and we don't know how they died, there used to be a certain procedure called the Egla Arufa. We would take a certain animal, and they would sacrifice it on the spot, right? Very unusual procedure. We don't do it nowadays. And this is the town that's closest to the spot with his body. And there's a certain amount of responsibility. The town that is closest to the, listen very carefully, the town closest to the dead body has a responsibility for it. Because you can make an assumption that maybe had they been escorted or given provisions or maybe taken care of, this wouldn't have happened. We don't know what happened. But had we taken care of this person, for some reason, maybe we could have saved their life. So one thing they are told to do is to go over there, they say certain prayers, and they wash their hands over the spot where the dead body was, right? Or over this animal, wherever the sacrifice would occur. And what's the idea is that we're praying to God, and we're trying to wash our hands of the responsibility over this. So this custom actually, I believe, exists in at least in some form, that when we go to the cemetery, maybe we were somehow negligent for the death of this person. So we go, we kind of pray and we say, I need to wash my hands of any responsibility over this. Maybe had you said something more, had you done a little bit more, oh, no, impossible to know. So it's to wash my hands of responsibility. It's worth mentioning because the community this person was in has a responsibility. We feel responsible. And we want to find out reasons, and we want to change, and maybe yes, gun control, maybe no gun control, maybe less video games, actually definitely less video games, right? I'm sorry I mentioned this, but my yeshiva, where I sent my kids, the Jewish day school, they sent out a whole thing. We've beefed up, all the schools did it, we've beefed up security measures, and they wrote a long email, which, we wanted to read, Rabbi Fagi, teacher at school, so half the first graders didn't turn up for school, So in our school that didn't happen, thank God, everyone went, and they sent out a letter, which they should do, we're very happy with, an email to all the parents. And it went through, and it says terrible atrocity, and we pray, and we feel terrible, I don't know, that kind of stuff. And it was signed off, Rabbi, whatever. And then it said, P.S. Everyone's talking about gun control. Yes, no. But no one seems to be talking about the influence that media is having on people's minds. That was the P.S. they put in the email. And you know what? I was happy they wrote that. Even though we don't judge, and it's not a time for examination, right? We wait a little bit, we go through the mourning process, and then we've got to figure out, we do immediate safety checks, but then we figure out why exactly. But you know what? I needed to hear that. I'll tell you just once. I'm sorry I mentioned this, but I must say it. We Jews are, this extreme violence, and hunting is not a Jewish thing, by the way. Seriously, we're not big hunters, If you just shoot an animal, you can't even eat it, by the way. It's not kosher. Even if it's a kosher animal, you can't shoot a cow and eat it. There's certain ways you have to treat it and kill it and clean it and all that. But I was at a neighbor's house once, and he had this video game, right? Grand Theft Auto, I think it was called. Have you ever seen this game? Yeah. I could not believe it. I mean, I'm old. I grew up Atari. Right? It was like, bleep, 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 bleep. And that was entertainment. Hours. I said, I watched that thing for an hour. And by the way, it was like a big panel with a wooden paneling on it. You know what I'm saying? It was like a whole, had wood on it. And I loved my Atari. And bleep, bleep. And he got really excited. Bleep, 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 And here, I couldn't believe, I'm not that old-fashioned. I've watched many crazy movies. But you got young kids who are like thrashing women, right? Shooting them. I couldn't believe. I'm like, whoa. Even now, I'm not such an old guy, but even now I was shocked by it. I had to say it. We have to, and if we can't change society, and we cannot, we have to be careful what we bring into our homes and allow our kids to see. Because heaven forbid, we don't want our kids to ever be involved in such activities, heaven forbid. And every mother always says, I couldn't believe it, I never saw my child doing it, They always seem to say that, right? No one says, oh yeah, I knew they were going to go on a rampage. They're never saying that, right? I can't believe it, Okay, there's other mental health issues, which is not my area, not my field. I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know how to talk to that. But people need to be cared of. People need to be taken care of. There's no doubt about it. See if there's anything I missed. I think that is pretty much all I wanted to... one last thing. When it comes to mourning, one last thing. You got to get over it. there is something in Judaism called mourning too much. There's actually a halacha, a law in the Torah, that a person is not allowed to mourn too much. How do you mourn too much? People scratch themselves and hurt themselves, and I mean, you may have seen it. Other religions do this to this day. They actually flagellate themselves, they cut themselves. 100%. People still do it over in Islam. There's like over the dead prophets from the past. They sit and they'll cut themselves, right, and scratch themselves. It was very, very common, still is. Totally forbidden according to Jewish law. You're not allowed to mutilate yourself. There's mourning, but there are limits to mourning. You're not allowed to make any cuts or scratches on yourself. This is the Torah law over a deceased. That is totally forbidden. Okay, so even mourning, crying, bring it out, and it's the shiva. It's such a genius therapeutic system that helps people get out of this extreme phase of mourning with people around them out of it. But scratching and cutting yourselves are totally prohibited in the Torah. Okay, and people have to, as we said, people have to move on. Okay, death does not change a person's essence. Right? You are your soul. As I always say, you don't have a soul, you are a soul, you have a body. And that is something that we somehow have to keep in our minds. Right? So even through extreme tragedy that we're seeing, even the reaction, and I don't think it gets worse than killing children, heaven forbid, even that at some point there has to be a move on that we try to engender in our lives. That's the bulk of the information I wanted to share with you. I'll take any questions, thoughts, comments. Yes?
What's the concept of like not having tattoos and...
Okay, that is a completely separate law, and that is in the Torah. Your body does not belong to you. You're forbidden to have a tattoo. It is a myth, a complete myth, that you're not allowed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. You 100%, they do not check you for tattoos. It's a myth. I'll tell you where I think it comes from. I think it comes. This is my theory on this because I've been asked this a lot, and no Jewish sources say you cannot be buried. I think where it comes from is who used to get tattoos. Right now it's like, hey, cool, I got barbed wire on my wrist. You know what I'm saying? Like I got an e-ball. It used to be people who got tattoos were certain types of people, and those individuals were the kind of people who were like outside the community. And who used to run the cemeteries? The community. So they're able to say the kinds of people who got tattoos were the kind of people But now, I mean, who doesn't have a bit of Kabbalah, tattooed on their back? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, a quick story, by the way. I was actually in the gym, happened like 2 years ago, and I just came out of the shower. I was in New York Sports Club. This is pertinent to the story, so I'm telling you this. And I came out, and there was a guy standing there with a towel on, and he had Hebrew letters on his back. Sorry, I must hear the story. He had Hebrew letters on his back. So I'm like, I'm interested, I'm saying some geezer's got like Hebrew in his back, and what's going on, young guy. It's like inch over, and it's got some random letters. I'm like, hey, what's in your back? He goes, oh, it's Hebrew. I said, oh, where'd you get that? I go, I was in Israel, I was on Birthright, and I went to Sfat, and I had it upon. So I'm looking, I'm saying, what does it say? He goes, it's Kabbalah. I looked at it, it's complete gibberish. I didn't get your name on there, right? Get Nike, I know, put something on there, don't put your thing. So I'm looking at his back. So I'm like, okay, listen, if guys are willing to put like Hebrew or like a Magen David or something, I want to talk to them. I'm the rabbis there, I'm talking, we're schmoozing. I'm like, listen, I work for Birthright, listen, I've been in touch with you, can I have your phone number? And then I realized I'm in my towel asking a guy in the gym for his phone number. He was like, give me your website. And
It has nothing to do with the Holocaust and getting the tattoo.
No, nothing at all.
I've heard that
No,
as
those
well.
people who go through their tattoos, and by the way, if you do have a tattoo, you may not be obligated to remove the tattoo. Partly because actually removing a tattoo is not so simple, by the way, it could cause damage. I know someone actually who pays for people who want tattoos removed. Oh, wow. Many Ethiopian Jews were forced, culturally or sometimes physically, to have crosses tattooed on their foreheads. I know a lady very well who actually pays for people to get those tattoos removed. So if you want, you can, but you're not obligated to have your tattoo removed. But a person can definitely be buried in a Jewish cemetery with a tattoo, 100%, yeah.
So is there any reasoning to how the Germans cremated the bodies and tattooed the bodies? Did they look at like the Jewish law and say, well, we're going to do what they don't believe in so we can get them even more than we're already getting them?
I don't know.
Is there any,
I do not know. I've thought about it.
Yeah.
But let me be very, very clear. There's a famous story of a guy who went to some public bath, you know what I'm saying, or like a swimming pool, whatever, and he had a tattoo and was embarrassed, he had it covered, and he walked somewhere, and someone who had numbers on his arm said, I have nothing to be embarrassed about, and you have nothing to be embarrassed about. Right? It was a mistake you made, having that on there. In most cases, tattoos, they are mistakes. People regret them afterwards. You know what I'm saying? But we'll leave that aside. That's my opinion. So, I don't know. But let me be very clear. Anyone who went through that process, you don't get holier. That's called, that's real martyrdom. A person being killed because they're Jewish, and that is considered the highest level that a person doesn't want to reach, but if they're put into, have reached. Someone like Daniel Pearl, if you remember him, he was head cut off and he was told to be a Jew. We didn't make a big deal. No one spoke about it. They should speak about it. He was told before he was killed, he said, I'm a Jew, I'm a Jew, and he was a complete secular Jew. Right? He was beheaded, right, the journalist. That's a kadosh. That's a kadosh, yeah.
What about organ donation?
Okay, that's a little bit tricky. That's a very big area of Jewish law right now being discussed, organ donation in general. Generally speaking, the question comes down to not organ donation. It's what comes down to when does death begin? Because most organs have to be taken out while a person is partly alive. So how do we determine death is the question? Is it breathing? Is it brain death? Is it heart death? So that's the discussion. There are many observant Jews that do it. There's actually an organization called HODS, H-O-D-S, HODS, Halachic Organ Donation Society, whatever, and they organize it. There's ways to do it. So it is permitted, but it's very specific in the way it's done. But I'm not an expert. It's a big area of Jewish law right now. It's really how do you determine the point of death? I'm sorry to rush, but we're going to have to stop over there. If anyone has any thoughts, questions, you can always email me. And thanks for being part of this.